No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. I'm your host, Jess Root, and today we are talking Arizona Cardinals football, and what a great time it is to be an Arizona Cardinals fan because they are sitting at 9-1. 9-1. The 9-1 Arizona Cardinals. That's not something anyone, I don't think, ever could have predicted. I don't think Bruce Arians could have predicted 9-1. But they are. What happened? They played Detroit Lions. It was a showdown for the top team in the NFC. Whoever won that game would take over, at least for, at this point, the number one seed in the conference. Arizona did so, 14-6. Two first quarter, 2 touchdowns in their first 2 possessions, led by backup quarterback Drew Stanton, who is now the starter for the rest of the season after the injury to Carson Palmer set him out for the rest of the season. And those 2 touchdowns was all that were needed. He finished with 306 yards passing, completed 21 of 32 passes, the 2 touchdowns, and a couple interceptions. And the Arizona Cardinals defense did their job, holding the Lions to 2 first-half field goals and held on. The scoreless second half of the game, and the final result, 14-6, 9-1, and the Cardinals are rolling. They are rolling. They've won 6 straight, and it's starting to get into that crazy, or like, how good is this Cardinals team? Because even still, no one believes in this team nationally. There's just too much going against them. Well, tonight, if you're listening, and this is Revenge of the Birds Radio, this is your host, Jess Root. If you are listening live, thank you. We are back on the live broadcast. So if you have a desire to call in and give us your take, we're going to try and keep the show under an hour today. It's 646-478-3787. Again, 646-478-3787. You can call in and talk to me. Talk to Seth Cox, who will be joining us shortly. And let's let you know that this episode of Revenge of the Birds Radio is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading source for audio content, whether it be podcasts, audiobooks, whatever you're looking for. Audible.com is the best place for that. And as I have been telling you now for weeks and weeks, probably going on months, Audible is offering Revenge of the Birds Radio listeners a special deal where you can test out their service for a month. I've tested it out. I've downloaded several audiobooks. I use them when we travel in the van. Pack up the kids and the wife, and we're driving across the state to go and to visit our family. And one way to keep them quiet is by turning on an audiobook that I got from audible.com, and you can test out the service as well. Get yourself a free audiobook download by visiting audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. Test out the service for a whole month and get yourself the free audiobook download. And we're going to bring on Seth Cox in just a minute. He is on the line and waiting for him to bring him on. We're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the Cardinals win. We're going to talk about their 9-1 season. We're going to talk about the good and the bad from the win. There is a little bit of news in terms of injuries that came forward. And as we learned today, Tuesday, that Troy Nicholas, rookie second round pick, Troy Nicholas, tight end out of Notre Dame, really kind of a bummer of a season so far for him. He re-aggravated the ankle that sidelined him for a few weeks during the season, the high ankle sprain. His season, he was shut down, and he will miss the remainder of this season. Troy Nicholas season ended. He becomes the 6th player of the Cardinals to land on injured reserve. And the Cardinals, we're going to be looking forward to the game that they face this weekend in Seattle against the Seattle Seahawks, who lost to the Kansas City Chiefs and are now at 6-4. The Cardinals have a 3-game lead on the division, on the Seahawks and on the 49ers, and at least a 2-game lead over everyone else in the NFC. We're going to talk about that. So let's bring Seth Cox on the line. And, well, I'm using the wrong mouse. And here we go. Seth, good evening. How are you today?
Good, Jess. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to have you back. We're back doing the whole live show. I mean, we were always doing a live show, but no one else was listening to us when we were live. But we're back on live since our Blog Talk Radio host has improved, has upgraded my studio, that hopefully the audio quality is improved. So if you're listening to us live, let us know how it sounds. And we can keep the live show going. So tell us, Seth, how did it feel? You were at the game as Seth's son was actually celebrating a birthday. What was the energy from the side of the stadium? My vantage point from the press box is a little bit different. I could tell it was really loud and there was energy because I could feel it, but the press box is closed off. There's a glass in front of it, so we don't get the full effect. Tell us about the atmosphere in that stadium on Sunday.
It was one of those things that, especially in the first quarter with the fast start, I think it just really ramped up everything for the rest of the game. There were some lulls, especially in the second quarter. You saw the kind of lows of what Drew Stanton is as a quarterback, and I think that impacted a little bit of the how revved up the fans were, but especially in the third and fourth quarter, as the victory was closer and closer, you really saw the fans take hold of this idea of how important you can be in the game and really rev up and kind of start trying to make a difference in the game. And I think you saw that again, something similar to the Chargers game where you had a miscommunication on a snap on a big play, and I believe that was in the fourth quarter. And what that does is that really helps your team. It really helps. I think that was with about 6 minutes left, and that was a third down that led to a fourth down and led to a punt by the Lions. And that really, that was a good turning point in the game for the Cardinals. And I think you give a lot of that credit to the fans because of how loud they were.
And it's just another reason why you love the new stadium. Well, I guess it's not too terribly new anymore. It's been open since 2006. But you love the stadium, just the way that it holds in sound. And yes, there's always the question, will the roof be open or not? We're at the time of year where maybe the roof should be, but having that roof closed is just something amazing. And the fact that the Cardinals fans we've got a really good, solid fan base of diehard Cardinals fans. But interestingly enough, and this is something that I've said before, not on the podcast, but diehards get really, really have a hard time dealing with bandwagon fans. But the truth is, every fan base, every franchise, every sports franchise out there need the bandwagon fans. And many of those bandwagon fans have become diehards depending on the success of a team. But it's those bandwagon fans who jump on and take that level in the stadium from loud to raucous because they're on board as well. And we're seeing that again. We saw the first round of it back in the Kurt Warner days, and now we're seeing the residual effects as they're breaking records every single week with their TV broadcasts, and they continue to win at home. I don't know if you've been following the Cardinals for a long time. like many of us have. Now, I didn't follow the Cardinals before they came to Arizona, and really was about 1989, 1990 as a young teenager when I started following it. Oh my goodness, there's nothing at all to compare this year with in the history of the team that any fan's going to remember. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to have season tickets in the '98 season. I was like 12 at the time, and my father and I had season tickets, and we went to all the games, and we sat in the south end zone and on the bleachers at ASU, and it was terrible for I think we started in '96 or '95, I want to say. And so it was terrible. It was really an awful thing, and just to see it grow in that '98 season and see kind of what became of it, and now you see it even more with this season. Just comparing and contrasting, it's similar in terms of buzz, but I feel like there's a greater fan base, and I think that stems from even kind of that Denny Green era to the Ken Wisenhunt era to now, where there was something that was built here. We were actually talking about it on Twitter not too long ago with Jason at Purple and Orange and Sarah. I can't remember her Twitter handle off the top of my head, but talking about bandwagon fans and things of that nature, how a lot of Cardinals fans are getting called bandwagon fans. And I said part of that is the Cardinals, and this as the editor of Revenge of the Birds, that there's not a huge internet base of Cardinals fans. I mean, it's just not a huge.
And that's Arizona sports in general. There isn't a huge outside of the Suns, and even that, when you compare it to a lot of other teams, when it comes to Arizona sports in general, outside of Arizona, there's not a huge following, and the Arizona fan base is very casual about its following when it comes to internet traffic. When the team is intriguing, not even when the team is bad, so they turn on, like not like other fan bases where even bad will incite a fan base to talk about. No, if the teams here in Arizona aren't good, they don't matter. And we're seeing that, but they're good and they matter. And then this is more and more. This is a football town. I mean, it used to be a Suns town, but in terms of sports, this is a football town. Phoenix is, and there's something I haven't seen it since. Well, if we take the Super Bowl run from a few years ago, I was a teenager when the Suns went to the finals, and it was insane the Suns fever that people got, and we're getting that now, and it's not even the playoffs. There are Cardinals fans everywhere here now.
Yeah, and I was impressed because, we went to the game and we got there about 11, so 3 hours before the game, and we were at Westgate kind of just walking around and getting ready for stuff. And, I mean, there was absolutely nowhere to eat. There was nowhere to just hang out. It was literally just completely full of fans. Now, I would say, I don't know, maybe you have a better estimation based on other teams that have been in, but I felt like it was probably like 75-25 Cardinals to Lions fans. Or do you think there was that many Lions fans there?
I did, yeah. There were a lot of Lions fans there, and which is really weird because as bad as that franchise has been, now granted they were good this year, but that tends to there's a lot of Lions fans out here.
Yeah, and I thought that was impressive though, because I mean even this year, I think somebody said it was the Eagles game maybe, or maybe it was the 49ers game where it was like 60-40, and so to see that change already this year from a 60-40 Cardinals to opposition split to now 80-20, 75-25, that's huge in terms of just growth and seeing that maturity from the fan base of like, hey, we need to represent, let's not sell our tickets to opposing fans to make up, to pay for half of our season tickets this year or whatever. So, it's really cool to see.
Well, let's get into our topics for the night. We're gonna talk about the game, but let's talk about Troy Nicholas first. It's kind of a minor major story. It's just because it came through today. Troy Nicholas sent to injured reserve today. There was hope that he wouldn't be shut down for the season. When they mentioned that on Monday, that was kind of a signal to me. It's like, Nicholas is heading to IR. Re-injuring the ankle, where he had the high ankle sprain that sidelined him for 3 games earlier in the season. Really kind of a bummer of a year for him, because the second round picks for the Cardinals just haven't been hitting. And in his case, it hasn't been a case of lack of talent. He just hasn't gotten on the field. He started off the offseason after he was drafted, rookie camp, mini camps. He was on the sideline after hernia surgery, so he's recovering from that. First practice in, what does he do? He gets his finger caught in a player's jersey trying to catch a pass, and he breaks his finger. And so he's sidelined for the rest of the offseason workouts after one day. Then, so he struggles in training camp playing with that soft cast. Doesn't look really good, kind of lost in training camp. And then he gets some bit time, kind of as a third or fourth tight end. And then he sprains his ankle, high ankle sprain, sidelines for a bit. He gets called out by his head coach one week, saying he better get his butt back on the practice field. He did. And it was interesting. Sunday, it kind of looked like they had turned a corner with Nicholas. John Carlson has been the guy at tight end. Now, he's not been good, but he's been the guy at tight end. Anytime that there's a one tight end set, it was John Carlson. Every time that there was 2 tight ends anytime there was a tight end on the field, there was John Carlson. It was different on Sunday. There were a few plays. Troy Nicholas was the only tight end on the field. And there were times when in the 2 tight formation, it was Nicholas and Hausler with no Carlson. So it looked as if he had kind of turned a corner in his development, and the team was ready to trust him some more, only to have his ankle get hurt, and now his season is over. What are we to think of it? Can we already call him injury prone? Is it just unlucky, or now you tweeted the question. I don't know if it was. I don't remember. I didn't follow him in college. So was he an injury guy? Did he get nicked up a lot when he's at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the tweet. Somebody tweeted it out. He had like a litany of different injuries. So he is injury prone in that fact. It's not like it's the same thing over and over. He's injury prone in the fact that he's had like, I want to say 6 or 7 different injuries while he was at Notre Dame, and now he's kind of had the same thing in Arizona. And it's just one of those unfortunate things, but there are guys that are just, they're like that. That's what they are. Unfortunately, they're just, injury prone, bad breaks type of guys. And that just, it's unfortunate. You hope it doesn't follow them throughout their career, but there's definitely a lot of guys that have had their careers affected, obviously negatively by injuries, and that's something you just hope does not happen.
Did you see perhaps that he had kind of turned a corner, that his play was warranting? I mean, and we saw him out in pass routes. He'd made some nice catches, which at the very least, he was catching the passes thrown at him, as opposed to what John Carlson had been doing for Carson Palmer, who just seemed to be allergic to catching the football.
Yeah, what Nicholas is coming in was a guy that has the size, kind of speed that you like of a tight end, decent to above average hands, but all of a sudden he was having good hands. And so that was one of the bigger worries coming out for him, was he had some drop issues You knew the route running and things like that were going to be hit and miss because he's a guy that moved over from defensive end to tight end, so it was a transition. But he's really developed it in those cases, and now it's more than anything. It's disappointing in, like you said, he was starting to get a little bit of a chance, and now it's over and done with. And something that I kind of wrote about today, and he can't practice obviously either, so that's another big blow. But even in the off season at practices, OTAs, you don't get the same impact in terms of on-field type stuff that you do when you're in the game. And you can simulate those reps, you can do different things, but ending up with only 90 snaps from your second-round pick after getting, 4 snaps last year from Kevin Minter, and really, Minter's snaps have fallen completely off the grid.
And then you add to that Ryan Williams from 2011, and you just second round has not been good for the Cardinals or in recent history.
And so it's just disappointing in that aspect. Obviously, injuries are part of the game and things that you deal with, but it just seems a lot like he's had a lot of issues in terms of staying healthy.
So let's turn to the football game itself. There's lots to talk about. Goodness, a 14-6 win, 14-6 win over the Lions. We can talk about. Let's talk about the good and the bad. I think first let's talk about Drew Stanton, backup quarterback playing his former team. He gets the 2 early touchdowns. First 2 drives, got the touchdown. I think the one thing you can say is that he was able to very, very effectively implement the game plan, the scripted game plan that they had to start the game. And then after that, things kind of took a lull, which you almost expect. You have to expect, especially when you're playing a good defense and a guy who hasn't had, honestly, he's not had a lot of snaps in game situations. And so to be able to manage, especially a guy that's very high energy as Drew Stanton is. But if you look at the stat line, if you were just to look at the stat line and you see from the quarterback that you have, the starter, backup, doesn't matter. 21 of 32, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, and yes, the 2 interceptions. That's the type of stat line. Maybe take 1 pick out, but outside of the second interception, doesn't matter who your quarterback, especially a backup quarterback, you take that every single week. And strangely enough, that stat line looks a lot like a lot of Carson Palmer stat lines over the entirety of his career.
One of the things that, I talked about coming into this game was he had to improve his accuracy outside the numbers. I kept saying hashes. I meant numbers in my articles, but he had to improve his accuracy outside the hashes, and he was 43% or something crazy below like that coming into this game. And I looked at what Carson was doing, and he was at 67% in those games outside the numbers. And so you look at it and you're like, wow, that's a huge disparity. You're talking 23%, passes or completion percentage difference. And you look at it, and I think I had 2 drops for him outside the numbers. And so it was a lot of his own doing, missing and things of that nature. And then he comes back and he's, I think it was 8 for 12 or 9 for 12 outside the numbers with both touchdowns outside the numbers. And you look at that and you go, wow. You talk about, you identify a weakness and then you just immediately improve on it. And that's exactly what you want from a guy, whether he's your starter, your backup, a rookie, a veteran. Something we talked about a little bit with Palmer last year to coming into this year, could he cut down on the turnovers? Well, all of a sudden, Palmer's playing smart ball. He's not throwing the ball deep as much. He's not attacking downfield as much. I mean, and we're talking, above 10 yards. We're not even talking 20% or above 20-yard range. And, he's living off short routes, check downs, getting the ball out quick. And that was something you and I had discussed a lot about. And now all of a sudden you see that, and Palmer's having one of his best years statistically of his career. And then you talk the same thing about, okay, this is, Stanton's living in the middle, and teams are going to start to take that away. Well, the teams took that, the Lions took that away. Both of his interceptions came over the middle. They were both late throws. He probably had a window a little bit earlier, but I think, in my opinion, they were wrong reads. They were throws he shouldn't have even tried to have made because they were in such small windows. And that's what teams are going to do. They're going to force him to throw the ball outside. He had the one to Floyd that he overthrew Floyd in that kind of window where Palmer's really been making money this year, in that about 12-yard out range on that flood concept where they have a guy coming short, a guy in the middle, and a guy kind of deep. And Floyd was the deep guy, and he was about 17 yards downfield on kind of a corner route, and he was wide open, but there was a guy probably 6 yards in front of him, and so Drew had to put enough air on it, but also get the ball over the guy, and he just missed it. And that's one of those. Okay, that's the difference in a guy that has been out there throwing live passes, throwing live bullets the last 5 years, like Palmer has, versus a guy that has thrown 90 passes in the last 3 or 4 years, however long it's been. And that's what the difference is.
And I think what the one thing we can point to is why Stan was able to do so well is that he was kept clean. He wasn't sacked once. The offensive line, playing against a very disruptive defensive line for Detroit, was very good in pass protection. And we were talking a second about the running game, which was atrocious, but that's what Stanton needs. Just like if you take Carson Palmer a season ago, you kept him clean, he was able to do things. If not, he got skittish. And Drew Stanton's kind of the same way. And I'm going to make the comparison again. People are getting tired of hearing this. Drew Stanton is a lot like Drew Stanton is what the Cardinals want, and Ken Wisenhunt was hoping to get out of Kevin Kolb, that sort of line. And that's the type of quarterback he could have when he was given protection. A rhythm, he can move the ball. He's not a superstar. He doesn't have the same talents as, say, a Carson Palmer, but the results can be the same. And I keep looking at this season and saying, goodness, if they could have protected Kevin Kolb in 2011, or even in 2012, when things started out so promising, things go a lot different. Let's talk about, what did you think of the pass protection? I thought it was amazing, especially when you have Ziggy Ansah, who's been playing so well, and Ndamukong Suh, who's having a heck of a season. They were virtually, at least in the past, they were invisible.
Right, and I think outside of Ted Larson, who gave up a couple QB knockdowns, they really didn't even touch Drew Stanton. So it's one of those things that we've been having this conversation for a while now about Jonathan Cooper and when is Jonathan Cooper going to play. I think, and I tweeted this out, Drew Stanton didn't get sacked. He talked about it. He was kept basically clean for the entire game. That Cooper's not going to play. I mean, that's just until somebody is having somebody hurt. Basically, he's not going to play, and that's why, is because of how, you don't want to say good, because there were still the problems in the run game, but that just how good they were in pass protection. That's why he's not going to get on the field, because you can't disrupt what has been going on the last 3 or 4 weeks in terms of protecting the quarterback and how much how much these guys have done in that regard, and how important it is to keep that cohesiveness and kind of that unity together. And until somebody starts just really putting some pressure on Drew Stanton and maybe gives up another one of those knockout shots that Bobby Massey gave up against the Broncos, I really don't see any reason that you're going to make the move, no matter how bad the run blocking is at time. Because no matter how much you and I talk about it, this is a pass first team still, even with Drew Stanton at quarterback. So as long as he's upright, they're not going to change their ways.
Interesting fact: the NFL stat sheet shows that the Lions had 5 hits on Drew Stanton. Pro Football Focus gave the Lions only 3. Ted Larson giving up all 3 quarterback hits with another 2 hurries. So very good. Now on the flip side, the running game. Now this is a hard one to gauge because the Lions are really good against the run. And as we've seen, at least the interior line of the Cardinals is not good at run blocking. But, once again, they do. I'm going to take the 4 kneel downs that the Cardinals had during the game. So the final stats is they rushed 26 times for 46 yards. It's actually 22 times for 50 yards because of 3 kneel downs at the end of the game, 1 at the end of the first half. Andre Ellington, 19 carries for a whopping 42 yards, and 17 of those came in 1 carry. Take that 17-yard carry out, and you've got 18 carries for 25 yards.
It's a very Rashard Mendenhall type of day.
Oh no! That's worse than Rashard Mendenhall. Rashard was good for 2 yards, so you would have seen 18 carries for 35, 36 yards. But yeah, it's almost how much longer can the Cardinals continue to go and get this sort of just zero production out of the running game?
So I went back and I watched, and then I got on Pro Football Focus to make sure my numbers were right, and I had a little bit of different numbers than they did, but in terms of yards, but not in terms of runs in those directions. And you kind of look at it, and you had his 19 rushes, and for some reason, and you and I have had this conversation on air before as well. Bruce Arians has said, don't question the play calling. All right, fair enough, whatever. I'm not going to get into this whole thing, but of the 19 runs, for whatever reason, 10 of them went to the side that Ndamukong Suh was on. And overall, 14 runs went to the side that Ndamukong Suh was on. And my question is, why would you even – I understand you have to have some balance, but go away from Ndamukong Suh. Like, go the opposite direction of where Ndamukong Suh is. Because, let's just be honest. As good as Paul Funaika was in pass protection, and Lyle Findeline had a lot to do with that, those guys got worked in the run game. And, you saw a couple of plays where even as Ellington tried to bounce outside because Sue had already broken through, he's getting tackled in the backfield. And it's just one of those things where you look at it and you go, why are you trying this? Because it doesn't make sense in a scheme point of view. If you want to establish the run with your kind of scat back running back, work from the outside in, don't work from the inside out. And you look at what he did, and they ran inside quite a bit, and they weren't really successful at it. Like you said, he had the one really long run over the left guard, left tackle hole that went for like 17 yards. And I know you can't take that out, but if you take that out, like you said, he had no runs. He had no numbers over 10 yards on anywhere else on the line. But they kept trying to pound him in the middle. I mean, he had 2 runs over the right guard. He had 3 runs between the right guard and the center. He had 5 runs between the right tackle and right guard. And it's like, why? That's where they're
11 of his 19 carries came inside. 11 of the 19, which is I don't know. I get you have to run inside. It's not, you can't build a running game where you only run outside. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, why are you? And I get Arians is talking about it's Ellington is their bell cow, and so if he's fresh, he's going to get the carries. That wasn't going to be the case early on with Jonathan Dwyer, so obviously he does not have the same trust in Stephon Taylor to be able to be the change of pace back. You know, it's kind of weird to say that you've got a bigger, slower guy as your change of pace back, but yet that's what it turns out being. So you got Rashard Mendenhall last year. You had Jonathan Dwyer to start the year, and Ellington was being more productive. Dwyer's, and it was interesting, a conversation I was having in the press box long after the game. The comment came up is how much the Cardinals miss Jonathan Dwyer. It's something you really hate to say because of what he represents at this point, but they do miss him. And he wasn't, a marquee guy, but he was important for what they wanted to do in the running game.
Right, and not having a guy that, like you said, that you can trust on those interior runs to kind of wear down the team and then let Ellington break long runs is kind of showing the weakness of the Cardinals team, and something that, we'll talk about later. But when you get to January, there are certain teams you play that you don't necessarily want to get into an up and down the field battle with. You want to be able to run the ball and kind of grind the game out. And so that's something over these last 6 weeks that you really would like to see worked on and changed and improved going into the playoffs, where you're looking at the ability to have the 1 seed in the playoffs. And I mean, you're two games clear of everybody else and 3 games clear of everybody in your division. That's basically what your focus should be now, is that you should establish home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
Now, beyond the first 2 drives, the story early in the game was Drew Stanton coming out on like a man on fire and pushing the ball, forcing the issue down the field, as we saw against the Rams a week ago, where he came in, pushed the ball down the field, and he's very much, he has the mentality right now of a relief pitcher, where you kind of come in and he gets you off to a good start. And he needs to have that starter's mentality, and he was able to maintain it. Yes, he had the interception, but he was able to move the ball. I mean, he did well, because not only they didn't score any more points, but there weren't a ton of 3 and outs, and so he was getting a first down or 2 and things that then would stall, and they were playing field position, which was good. But outside of Stanton there at the beginning of the game, the story after that was very much about the Cardinals' defense. 6 point out, granted, Detroit's offense has not been good. They've been averaging with just over 20 points a game, but they have the skill players to be dangerous with Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate, Reggie Bush, who guaranteed he was sidelined with an injury, Joique Bell, who's more than capable, Eric Ebron and Brandon Pettigrew, who sat out. I mean, they've got a whole bunch of different weapons. And then add to that Matthew Stafford, who maddeningly inconsistent, but definitely has the arm talent to get it done. We saw him when he threw for over 5,000 yards a few seasons ago. And ever since then, it's kind of been. But just this defense, can you be more impressed than we've already been, or is this kind of the crowning moment of what the defense has done so far this year?
You look at what happened, and I think I went back and looked and kind of to figure out where the turning point was, and I think they got Calais back and Alex Okafor, and what that did for the team was that gave them that they had the same interior pass rush. Obviously, Tommy Kelly's playing a little bit better, Frosty Rucker as well, but they had the same interior push that they were getting before, but now they have somebody that can finish on the outside in Okafor, because the difference between like an Acho and an Okafor is Okafor has been finishing those pass rushes when a guy has to step up or, kind of move in the pocket because of Calais' pressure from the interior, and that's not something Acho does. That's not something Shaughnessy was doing. And I kind of compared him after the Redskins game to Paul Kruger. He's a guy that can take advantage of bad right tackles or left tackles, but he's also a guy, and he's been playing on the left side, so he's been going up against the right tackles, but he's also a guy that can he can clean things up. And you saw the first sack was really, was it a sack? No, it was just Okafor being the guy there cleaning it up. Matt Stafford dropped down on the ground, and all he had to do was touch him, and that's a sack, though. That's something that.
That's exactly what the defense wants to do. It wasn't necessarily Okafor, but he was there to do it, as opposed to Shaughnessy, who couldn't have gotten there quick enough, or Acho, who would overrun it.
Yeah, and that's what the difference has been for this team, really, since week, I think it was 6 I looked at, or 7. Even the Philly game where they gave up a ton of yards and 2 touchdowns, they still got some pressure. They still made Foles move off his spot consistently, something they weren't doing the first 5 games of the season. We really saw that come to a head in Denver. But you went through the first 5 games, and they're giving up, 310 yards a game, 2 touchdowns a game. They were still getting a lot of interceptions, so that hasn't changed. But the secondary's ball skills are just ridiculous. And now you add in a pass rush, and I'm the least homerish person that you'll find, but now that they've established a consistent pass rush, I think you have to say that this is the best defense in the NFL. And we saw that on Sunday, when the fact that they can shut down your run game, force you to throw the ball, and then they have guys that can go get the quarterback, move him off his spot, and then if you're not asking the secondary to cover for 5 seconds like they were early in the year, there's not a better secondary in terms of ball skills in the NFL. And that's just, between Peterson, Matthew, and then you add Cromartie in there, there's really not a better secondary in terms of just making plays on the ball than those 3 guys right there. And Jefferson and Johnson and Buchanan and even Powers aren't bad, but those 3 are probably the best in the league at it. And now they're having opportunities because the defensive line is creating havoc for the quarterback and making him move.
Well, and I think we could kind of pinpoint, and here's some stats where I was crunching in for all the crap the Cardinals have been getting for their pass defense. Through the first 5 games of the season, they were allowing over 300 yards per game, dead last in the league. After 5 more games, they're still in the overall ranking aren't good. They're 27th. But for 3 straight weeks now, and 4 of the last 5, they have held a team to under 200 yards passing. The first five games, they allowed 309 yards per game in the air, and over the last 5, they've averaged 221 yards allowed. Now that does include in there, that makes it even more impressive because you have the 400 some odd yard performance by Nick Foles, but then after that you've got nothing. And we can kind of pinpoint it because it was right about 4 or 5 weeks ago that Tyrann Mathieu started getting significant playing time again. Matthew's back in there, and we saw what happened when he got hurt in the last year. And even when he's not statistically he's not getting tons of tackles, he's not statistically doing a whole lot. there is an effect that Tyrann Mathieu has to that defensive backfield, because we saw it the game after he got hurt, and and the Cardinals had to go with Anton Kaysen. And what happened? Ryan Fitzpatrick shredded them. They didn't have the adjustment. Bring Mathieu back healthy, even though he's not, he's the Badger, but he's not quite the Badger he was a year ago. And all of a sudden, the pass defense looks world-class again. One of the readers at Revenge of the Birds suggests that one of the reasons why the pass rush has improved so well is because Badger is the Badger again. So he's healthier, and so you've added another threat down the field in coverage. And now, after 8 sacks in the first 8 games, the Cardinals have racked up 10 sacks in the last 2. This defense is starting to look, which is amazing, because they still have the losses. And forget Dansby in Washington. They still lost John Abraham for the season. They still lost Darnell Dockett. Still, they've lost Matt Shaughnessy. And goodness, this defense is impressive.
Yeah, it's been very impressive, and you kind of look at what they've done when they're able to do it. And I get the idea of the secondary leads to the pass rush, but I just have never been a huge advocate of that, just because I look at what teams like the Giants and even teams last year like the Seahawks, the Legion of Boom, the so-called great secondary. And this year, all of a sudden, my buddy tweeted me and I said, why have the Seahawks fallen off in terms of pass defense? I said, it's because they can't create pressure. And he had a great stat. He said they went from being number 1 in the league by far of creating pressure on 37% of passing snaps to now they're dead last at 18. And all of a sudden that invincible secondary is now very pedestrian. And, Richard Sherman's a good player, but he's not Richard Sherman. Like, oh man, we can't throw at Richard Sherman. Earl Thomas is still a good player, but he doesn't look like Earl Thomas that we've come to know. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they can't cover for that long. When you're asking guys to cover for a long time, a long period of time, it creates a bad situation, and it makes it hard on the secondary, and we're seeing the effects of that in Seattle, and I think we were seeing the effects of that here in Arizona, where, like I said, for the first 5 weeks, you had a lot of big games from quarterbacks. The secondary had to make plays and gamble a lot, and now all of a sudden they don't have to gamble because the pressure's on them up front. So you're able to just sit back and let the plays come to you. I mean, the best example of that was Gerard Powers. He didn't gamble. Matthew Stafford knew he had to get the ball out quick. He read it perfectly, and he broke on the ball and dropped it.
That was so close. That was such a close one.
Yeah, and you just were hoping the rest of the game, man, I really hope that doesn't come back to bite the Cardinals. And it didn't. And because the defense just kept the pressure up all game long. And, it shows that this is, no matter what statistics you look at or anything like that, at least the last 4 weeks, they've been the best defense in the NFL.
And Patrick Peterson, just throw some more numbers out there. I tweeted these out after the game on Sunday. Between Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate, they combined for, what was it? It was a total of 7 catches for 101 yards. No touchdowns. Obviously, there were no touchdowns in the game, and an interception. Matthew Stafford, when targeting those 2 players, had a passer rating of 43.8. They targeted Calvin Johnson 12 times, the 5 receptions for 59 yards. And that was mostly Patrick Peterson. He's played fantastic. Mostly Patrick Peterson. There were also Gerard Powers was on left on him one-on-one a couple of times, and they tried to exploit that. They had him running down the seam with Powers on him, and they couldn't He couldn't make the play. That defense is looking good, and Patrick Peterson finally healthy. Dadgummit, those two, between he and Antonio Cromartie, wow. If they can keep this up, they can carry the defense. And Patrick Peterson, he kind of said it, the defense and this team will kind of go as far as their secondary takes them. They're one of the most talented parts of the team, and they're asked to do a lot. If they can continue to play at this high level, goodness. And then, which leads us to what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think because of their ability to stop the run and the fact that they don't really necessarily play a ton of great quarterbacks coming up here, guys that have proven to be quarterbacks that can beat you with their arm, that I think they can keep it up. But, it'll, I think, and, you're about to introduce it, but I think this weekend is really going to be the kind of tipping point of how this season ends, and not necessarily in terms of playoffs or not playoffs, but in terms of seeding and things of that nature.
And before we talk about the particular matchup, let's look ahead, because there's kind of the talk around the NFL is who can beat the Cardinals, and everyone is talking about Green Bay, especially the way Aaron Rodgers is playing. Of a show that I will admittedly say I watch Highly Questionable every afternoon that it's on. Dan Le Batard on ESPN with his dad and Bomani Jones. And they've been very critical of the Cardinals, saying that they're this year's Kansas City Chiefs, and they're just going to kind of keep rolling along until they play someone like the Packers in the playoffs, so the first game they get in the playoffs and get blown out. I don't know. Aaron Rodgers is playing at an incredibly high level, but there isn't any NFC team that scares, at least from a fan, from an analyst. There isn't a single team in the NFC that scares me based on the way the Cardinals are playing right now. Even with Drew Stanton at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, yes. On the road, maybe, because when you get a backup quarterback on the road, you can tell Stanton's played much better at home than he has on the road. But that defense, I think it's really, with Calais Campbell, they're going to get Matt Shaughnessy back here in a couple of weeks. When I'm looking at this defense, and I'm thinking, who can't they stop? How would they match up against Aaron Rodgers? I know. They covered players really well. I don't think that it's that cut and dry. I don't think it's a case where that Aaron Rodgers is going to shred them. I don't think it's that easy. I think Aaron Rodgers, if it comes down to quarterback play, obviously they're going to have the edge. But we're looking at this. I'm starting to believe this is turning into something maybe special.
And my philosophy is simply, you want to stay away from the elite quarterbacks for as long as possible. So,
always.
You want to avoid the Packers until the NFC Championship if possible. I was talking about on Twitter today, or I think maybe it was yesterday. I'm not sure, but if you can, theoretically, if you can avoid Aaron Rodgers until the NFC Championship game, that's a lot better than having to face, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers in round 2. And that's just because you want your defense to come in hot, and there's going to be, hopefully, a week off for the Cardinals, a bye week to get ready, and sometimes those are bad things, especially when you go up against elite quarterbacks. And like you said, the way he's playing right now, let's put it this way. I wouldn't bet against Aaron Rodgers at this point, even if it was the Cardinals. I don't think it would be a blowout. I think anybody that says it's a blowout is just, trying to draw ratings. But I think the way he's playing and how locked in he is right now, you just want to avoid that situation for as long as you possibly can. And hopefully in the Cardinals case, it's just one game. You avoid it for one game, and then you get it in the NFC Championship game. And in the NFC Championship game, in a championship game setting, all of a sudden, and this is just my opinion, so maybe I'm wrong, but all of a sudden, all the pressure's on Aaron Rodgers because you've got to prove that you are, that great, that you can beat this Cardinals defense that, is playing above their heads, and they don't really belong there, and, all of that stuff. So that's why, in my opinion, you want to avoid that as long as possible. Because if you, theoretically, hypothetically, I guess you would say, you're looking at, just based on who's playing well right now, you're looking at probably Aaron Rodgers and either Tom Brady or Peyton Manning for hopefully the Cardinals' last 2 games of the season. Those are some heavy hitters that you have to, and that's gonna. All of a sudden, Todd Bowles is really going to earn that extension. So,
I think it comes down to the Cardinals. I think if they can lock up home field, if they can lock out the number 1 seed, it's going to be really hard to pick. The NFC's kind of turned into a weird thing. But if they lock up the number 1 seed, you have to like their chances to come out of the NFC. Now playing against Peyton Manning again or Tom Brady in a Super Bowl, obviously that's going to be a different story. But at this point, I don't think there's anyone that the Cardinals can't stop the way they're playing right now. Drew Brees, I think Aaron Rodgers can figure them out, and I think that perhaps that they would be able to keep the Cardinals offense the Cardinals offense might keep them, but I don't think there's a defense. I don't think there's an offense that the Cardinals can't stop. And much the way that the Seahawks did it a season ago, the Cardinals are playing at that high a level right now.
And the one difference is, and this is where, kind of all the way circles back to the beginning of the show, where you talk about they have to figure out something to consistently maintain drives on offense, because what Seattle did last year was they got after the quarterback, which the Cardinals are doing now, but they also controlled the line of scrimmage and were able to really impact the game in terms of when those, the other guys were having to work from behind, and they could control the line of scrimmage on offense and run the ball down the other team's throat. The Cardinals haven't shown that, and I don't know if it would be a shootout, so to speak, but with Aaron Rodgers or Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, those guys have the ability to put up points quickly if there are mistakes. They're as good as Matthew Stafford can be at times. He's not those guys, and that's what I think that's the one thing at this point that worries you. And not even worries you, but I think that would be the one point where you would understand if somebody was to pick against the Cards. Again, saying a blowout, I think that's just silly, but I think you could end up with something like where you saw last year with the Chiefs, and I'm not saying they're the same teams, but where you see a team able to get into a rhythm, and that's something, Aaron Rodgers is known for. He gets into a rhythm, and all of a sudden it's like, just hang on. Hopefully you can hang on. And I think that's why you want to try to avoid that situation as long as possible.
Those of you who are listening live, you're about to lose us. Our time on the air is about to close. That's no worries. Give us a few minutes. We'll be wrapping up the show. Got one little topic left to talk, and that's the game against the Seahawks. So never fear. Give us a few minutes. It'll be archived. You'll be able to listen to the last few minutes. If you're listening via download, it doesn't matter. So what I'm saying right now doesn't make any difference. But let's talk about the game this weekend. Seattle's kind of at a tailspin, and I mean, they lost a game. They're 6-4. They're having Marshawn Lynch problems. They lost Brandon McBain for the rest of the season. Their secondary has Russell Wilson is making plays after plays after plays. He's having actually quite a phenomenal season overall if you look at what he's doing. But their defense is giving up so many more points than they were a season ago. This game this weekend, playing in Seattle doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me in the least. At the beginning of the year, this was a penciled, and there's no way that the Cardinals. And yes, Seattle's going to bring their A game. They're going to be hungry because they lost the Cardinals already. They lost last week. The Seahawks have lost that air of invincibility to me. They've lost that invincibility at home because the Cardinals beat them, then the Cowboys beat them. I think the Cardinals on a rule. I think the Cardinals can get this game. And if they win this game, season's over for the NFC West. They've got this division. There won't be a single team left in the entire NFC that will have a head-to-head, because they have wrapped up at least a 500 season into the division. There will have been 8-0 against the NFC. There won't be anybody that could beat them on any sort of tiebreaker.
Yeah, and I think with that, you look at this in two different ways. Obviously, Arizona's going up there looking to shut down the season in the NFC West and really
just crush the throat, just stomp on him.
Yeah, and it would take a downfall, a collapse of epic proportion if they were to win in Seattle on Sunday to lose the NFC West. I mean, it would probably be one of the worst downfalls we've seen in kind of the NFL. And so you look at it from that, and the Cardinals go in looking at it and saying, okay, we got this. We have to do this. But on the flip side, you're playing a Seattle team that is kind of in the spot the Cardinals were last year, where you're desperate. I mean, you're backed up against the wall, and you have to win this game. And that kind of scares me in terms of what you're going to see from Seattle, because I think this is a game they know they absolutely have to win, because like you said, it would take a miracle for the Seahawks.
They'd be 4 games down. They'd be 4 games back in the division with 5 left to play.
It would take,
and without the benefit of any tiebreaker at all. So they would have to completely surpass them. They would have to they'd not just tie them and have the tiebreak. They would have to completely beat them by a full game.
Yeah, and so you don't think it's going to happen, obviously, for the Cardinals, but you don't even want to chance it. So you need to come out of Seattle with a victory in terms of just finding a way to lock up this division and be done with this division. And now all of a sudden you're playing for seeding. And that, that's a whole different animal. And I know everybody's going to look at it and go, oh, well, you want to finish 15-1 and you want to do this and that and this. And you know what? You want to finish in first, whether you're 13-3 or 12-4 or whatever it takes. You want to be number one in the division, and but you also are number one in the conference. But you also want to suck the life out of your opponents this weekend, and take all the hope they have going forward. And really, I mean, you'll put a knife in the heart of Seattle, the defending Super Bowl champs, in their own stadium, and having a chance to do that. Obviously,
I think the Cardinals will be. This game is gonna be amazing. It might be ugly, but this is gonna be one heck of a game, because the Cardinal. I mean, this is where the two teams are very different. yes, the Seahawks are clinging to their season at this point. There's a difference. They've already won a Super Bowl. So they've reached that precipice. And we know when it comes to professional sports, and especially with the pro athlete, once you get that championship, all those sacrifices that you make, everything, it's really hard to replicate when you are hungry for that first championship. The Cardinals had success a season ago, but because they didn't get the postseason, they didn't get a chance to go to the postseason, that hunger and that desire just eats at them, which is why their hunger, I think, outdoes what Seattle, because, well, besides they've had injury, and they lost Max Unger now for 3 to 4 weeks, and they've lost Brandon Mebane, and then this and that, and they got rid of Percy. They have no real weapons anymore. Marshawn Lynch is causing some issues, but they're not going to have the same type of hunger because they've already been to the highest place. They've already experienced that. And they have to come up with other ways, like so many of the many champions, Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, who have to cling to any negativity to stay hungry. The Cardinals have that. They have that hunger because they haven't reached there. And they have so many people that are hung on their team that just want it bad.
Well, and I think, like I said, the one thing that worries you is that this is a dangerous situation where Seattle's desperate and they're trying to, like you said, cling to something. And so,
if they do win this game, it could propel them into a role potentially.
Yeah, and because it's not like last year where they were on a roll and the Cardinals came in and kind of gave them the unfortunate slap they needed to wake themselves up for the rest of the season. That's what they did last year. This year it's different. It's they've been slapped numerous times and they haven't slapped back. So now you're waiting to see what do the champs have, and I think it's a defining game for Seattle in terms of kind of their legacy, or maybe it's too soon to write that, but maybe just define their legacy. But then I think it's also a defining game for Arizona because you want to legitimize what you've done this year. And even at 9-1, you're not hearing, oh, the Cards are the best team in the NFL. They're the team that you have to watch out for. All you're hearing is, look how great New England is. Look at what Aaron Rodgers is doing. And I'm not one of those people.
What they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people that worries about that type of stuff or feeds into the narrative of the media not giving you props. But I think you don't want to feed the media narrative of you're not as good as your record states. And I think a loss here, even though they're 6.5-point underdogs, kind of does feed into that narrative and really, really strengthens that narrative that, oh, the Cardinals aren't as good as their record says they are. So I think that's another thing you want to do is you want to shut everybody up and just get moving.
And then what I want the most about this game is a win. What it does, I think it legitimizes their place in the talk of championship contenders. It places, even with the backup quarterback, it places them in the forefront to say, no, we are as good as we are, as opposed to a loss, which just, opens the door a little bit. Kind of like talking to Sean Yule last week of the Pride of Detroit, a loss to the Cardinals isn't the end of their season. It does, but all it does is just open that door just a little bit to the doubt of the previous year's fallouts and collapses. And a loss here, it's not a game that they're supposed to win. But if they lose, then just opens that door a little bit to say, is it going to fall apart? Is it finally going to happen? I, for one, can't wait. This is good. This is a must-watch game. I hope for the sake of the schedule, and I don't think it's quite up yet, but I hope that Fox picks up this game and makes it the national game. They haven't made the decision yet, but let's see who's on the. What are the other late games? I'm trying to pull it up. What are the late games for this next week?
Let's take a look here.
Week 12. And you've got Rams, Chargers, Cardinals, Seahawks, and Dolphins, Dolphins, Broncos, Redskins, 49ers. Broncos always tends to get the national one, but oh my gosh, it'd be the Fox. Well, in the one on Fox, their game of the week. You'd have to. I think that's going to be the one that they have to broadcast nationally. I think it has to be.
Even the rest of the games, you have maybe the Patriots at the Lions, maybe, or the Lions at the Patriots, which will be a Fox broadcast. And I mean, Packers at Vikings really isn't anything.
No, it's not.
It really should be the Cardinals Seahawks, but we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but that's what they should, because that's going to be a fantastic football game. Arizona Cardinals fans, this has been Revenge of the Birds Radio. We've got a big matchup this weekend in Seattle. I myself, we will have a preview show. I will be speaking with Danny Kelly from Field Goals. That will be Thursday afternoon, I believe. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to broadcast it, if I'm going to do the show live as we're doing tonight, as we did on Tuesday. But I believe we will be doing that show live Thursday afternoon, which I have it slated for. I haven't had to confirm it for 2:30 Arizona time, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, if you're listening across the nation. But Danny Kelly from Field Goals, our Seahawks blog, will be a guest. And until then, Arizona Cardinals 9-1. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Visit RevengeOfTheBirds.com. Keep talking. Keep with the conversation. Read the articles, the content that are there. I write stuff. Seth writes stuff, and sometimes it's be good. We've got a great Cardinals community. Check us out on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. You know the deal. This show, if you're listening via download, you can subscribe on Stitcher Radio or on iTunes. Seth, thank you for joining me on the show as always.
Oh, no problem, Jess. I look forward to next week and talking 10-1.
All right. Arizona Cardinals fans, this is Jess Root. That's Seth Cox. We are signing out. Go Cardinals. You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting RevengeOfTheBirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at Facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.